Eliza Thorn inhaled the crisp, dry air of the Silver Creek Metropolitan Police Headquarters, a place she now had to frequent as the new administrative assistant for Councilmember Alistair Green. Her task this afternoon was retrieving a highly sensitive, unredacted public safety report. A document Councilmember Green needed to challenge the newly appointed police chief, Oren Holmes, in the upcoming City Hall session. She clutched the heavy manila folder to her chest, navigating the maze of institutional gray corridors. She was a journalist by training, working this City Hall job as a strategic vantage point. Every second spent in this building felt like an investigative mission. Just as she rounded the corner near the records office, a large, heavy cart piled high with archive boxes was being pushed too quickly by a distracted records clerk. Eliza saw it too late. The collision wasn't violent, but it was enough. The crucial report flew from her grasp, papers exploding across the highly polished floor in a confetti of classified information. Her heart sank with a heavy, sickening thud. The chief's granite gaze. A report like that on the floor is a report in the wind. Miss, you should have secured it. The voice was deep, smooth as river rock, and utterly devoid of warmth. Eliza froze, mid-crouch, and slowly looked up. Standing over her was Chief Oren Holmes. He was younger than his profile picture suggested, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit that seemed too sharp, too perfect for the chaos around him. His posture was military straight, and his dark, close-cropped hair only accentuated the angular severity of his features. His eyes, a clear, startling shade of gray, fixed on the scattered papers with an expression of clinical disappointment. He didn't offer to help. He simply observed, radiating an aura of immovable, cold authority that made Eliza feel like an undisciplined child caught vandalizing a historical monument. My apologies, Chief Holmes. I did not see the cart, Eliza said, scrambling to gather the pages. The formal tone felt inadequate for the tidal wave of humiliation washing over her. Apologies are for mistakes, Miss Thorn. This is negligence, he stated, his voice a quiet, precise instrument of judgment. She knew he knew her name. She was the council member's assistant, a known quantity, or perhaps an observed threat. The privacy of this data is paramount. Next time, I suggest you use a secure carry case. What is the rush? Councilmember Green needs this for his pre-session review this evening, Chief, she explained, holding the knock-rumpled documents to her chest. Then Councilmember Green will wait, he replied, his granite gaze never wavering. Has anyone taught you the proper departmental protocol for transmitting secured documents? No? Then learn it. This is not a casual workspace. Do not let this happen again. He adjusted the cuff of his suit, a small, dismissive gesture that spoke volumes, and walked away, his footsteps echoing with an irritating certainty that he was right and she was utterly wrong. Cathartic condemnation. Eliza managed to deliver the report. Spending the rest of the day refiling and organizing a mountain of paperwork, Councilmember Green had conveniently dropped on her. By the time she met her friend, Mrs. Gwendolyn Perkins, at their usual haunt, the last edition diner, she was a vibrating wire of pent-up frustration and self-reproach. Gwendolyn, a longtime City Hall clerk with the gentle face of a librarian and the wisdom of a political historian, was already settled in their corner booth, the same booth they always chose, tucked away near the back, by the rarely used emergency exit. Oh, my dear. You look like you just wrestled a bear and lost, Gwendolyn observed. Sliding a cup of steaming black coffee across the checkered table, Eliza took a long, fortifying sip. Worse, Gwendolyn. I encountered the chief. She then launched into a breathless, detailed account of the document disaster, culminating in Holmes's cold, patronizing reaction. He was so arrogantly calm, like he was genetically engineered in a lab to be perfectly superior and judge the rest of us pathetic humans. Gwendolyn chuckled softly. Chief Holmes is definitely a type. They call him the Iceman around the precinct. He took the job after that scandal with the previous chief, remember? He was brought in to clean up, and he's doing it with zero personality.
Zero is generous.
He has the personality of a highly polished doorknob, Eliza countered. stabbing her fork at a piece of cherry pie with theatrical violence. I can respect his competence, but the sheer utter arrogance of the man. The way he looked at Milikai was contaminating his pristine police station just by existing. He didn't even offer a single word of help. He just stood there, judging. She leaned forward conspiratorially, lowering her voice, but the adrenaline still made her pitch higher than usual. He's handsome, I'll give him that. Unfairly so, in that sharp, chiseled way that should come with a warning label. But his eyes are just concrete. There is no warmth, no humanity, just a perfectly tailored suit covering an emotionally unavailable automaton. I bet he's never laughed in his life. I bet he calculates the optimal time to blink. Gwendolyn smiled with sympathy. He is certainly intense. But Eliza, he also reduced the response time for emergency calls by nearly 20% in his first 6 weeks. He's not well liked because he doesn't play the political games the others do. He just works, judges. Don't forget the judging. He's arrogantly hot, Gwendolyn. A dangerous combination because you want to be mad at him for being so cold. But you can't look away because he's a work of art, Eliza admitted with a defeated sigh. He thinks he's above everyone. I hate that kind of superiority complex. They continued their conversation, the steam from their coffees creating a temporary, comforting barrier against the city. Eliza eventually calmed down, the venting having done its job. She paid her share, hugged Gwendolyn, and headed out into the cool evening, the city lights shimmering on the damp sidewalk. She was parked a block away, near the less frequented back entrance of the diner's adjacent parking lot. The note of Certentia's. Eliza reached her modest sedan. She noticed a small, starkly white envelope tucked securely under her windshield wiper. It wasn't a flyer. It felt too heavy, too deliberate. She pulled it free, recognizing the official-looking, embossed seal of the Silver Creek Police Department in the corner. Her hands began to shake almost imperceptibly as she broke the seal and pulled out the folded card. The handwriting was bold and elegant. Black ink on thick cardstock. Miss Thorn. For someone with a background in journalism, you failed to check your surroundings. The corner booth has a direct sightline to the back emergency exit. I found your assessment of my arrogance compelling. Your subsequent physical evaluation, arrogantly hot, was, while unprofessional. Noted, it seems we need to discuss departmental protocols, security breaches, and professional boundaries immediately. Dinner? Tomorrow night. 7 o'clock. My office will call to confirm a location. Where? Something that allows you to breathe. Chief Oren Holmes. Eliza's mouth went dry. He had been there. The entire time, he hadn't just heard her. He had listened to the entire embarrassing, over-the-top rant about his personality and his looks. The color drained from her face as she looked up. Wildly scanning the dark, almost empty parking lot then, she saw him, standing beside a massive, matte black SUV parked near the shadow of a high brick wall, was Chief Oren Holmes. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was in a simple, perfectly fitted gray t-shirt and dark jeans, the casual clothing somehow making him look even more formidable, accentuating the lean strength of his frame. He pushed off the vehicle and began walking toward her, his stride unhurried. Devastatingly self-assured. Chief Holmes, Eliza managed, her voice a weak, humiliated whisper. I had no idea you were there. I sincerely apologize for my comments. He stopped a few feet away, close enough for her to catch the clean, sharp scent of his cologne. His gray eyes were dark in the evening light, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something that wasn't coldness, a hint of something like dry amusement. No need to apologize. Miss Thorn, he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. You were right about the arrogance. It's often necessary in this job, and you were certainly right about the other part too. He paused, his eyes holding hers. But a note about protocol. When venting about your superior, never assume the corner booth is safe. I look forward to our discussion tomorrow night. He gave her the smallest, most arrogant half-smile she had ever seen, a flash of pure, infuriating confidence. He then turned and got into his powerful vehicle, starting the engine with a throaty roar that seemed to emphasize his authority. He drove away, leaving Eliza clutching the note, her mind a chaotic jumble of dread, embarrassment, and a dizzying, undeniable sense of anticipation. Her perfectly planned life had just been disrupted by the one man she had publicly declared she hated. Eliza Thorn spent the entirety of the next day in a state of controlled panic. Her usually sharp focus was frayed, replaced by a constant nervous anticipation. The morning started with an unexpected message delivered not by a secretary, but by Lieutenant Avery Nolan, the chief's formidable second-in-command. Avery, a woman in her late 40s, with a pragmatic face and the air of someone who had seen every absurdity the city could offer, simply placed a small, elegant card on Eliza's desk. "Chief Holmes asked me to confirm your appointment for this evening, Miss Thorn. 7 o'clock. It's a private residence near the river. Dress code is specified on the card. It is not negotiable. He also requires the unredacted Holland Street files, the full version be delivered to his private residence at 6:45 p.m. This is not a coincidence. He wants a professional pretext for your presence." Lieutenant Nolan's voice was flat, betraying no opinion on the peculiar arrangement. Eliza took the card. It listed an address far outside the city center, a wealthy, secluded neighborhood danned beneath it. The instruction, casual but composed. "Lieutenant Nolan, is this an official meeting?" Eliza asked, trying to gauge the office's perception. Avery Nolan's lips barely twitched. "The chief's meetings are always official, Miss Thorn. The nature of the official business, however, is flexible. He insists on discretion. I suggest you treat this as highly sensitive departmental business, which, considering the file content, it is." She then walked away, leaving Eliza to grapple with the reality. This was more than a date. It was an imposition, a strategic move by the chief to assert his authority while simultaneously satisfying his curiosity. He was meeting her on his own turf. On his own terms, an unsettling atmosphere. At 6:45 p.m., Eliza arrived at the specified address. The house was a modern architectural marvel, clean lines, glass, and dark stone, perched above the Silver Creek with a view of the sprawling city lights. It felt intimidating, minimalist, and very much like its owner. She was greeted not by staff, but by Chief Holmes himself, who opened the massive front door before she could even ring the bell. He was wearing a simple black cashmere sweater and dark trousers, looking less like a police chief and more like a sophisticated, potentially dangerous businessman, right on time. "Miss Thorn," he noted, taking the heavy file from her. His fingers brushed hers, a brief, electrifying contact that felt intentional. That's professionalism. "Come in." The interior was all polished concrete and stunning yet stark art. No clutter, no warmth, just precision. He led her past a massive open kitchen to a dining area with a glass wall overlooking the river. A table was set for two, impeccably, but without a hint of romantic flourish. It felt more like a negotiation table than a date. "The files are secure here," Oren said, placing the Holland Street report on a nearby mahogany sideboard. "Now, the second item on the agenda, dinner. I trust you like Italian?" "I had a local chef deliver." Eliza felt the need to regain some control. "Chief Holmes, I appreciate the dinner, but I want to be clear. The things I said last night were said in private, out of frustration with a terrible first day. I did not intend to disrespect your office or your character." Oren poured 2 glasses of deep red wine. He handed one to her, his gaze steady. "I never assumed disrespect, Eliza. I assumed honesty. And honesty is a rare commodity in City Hall. I invited you here tonight not to reprimand you, but to understand what fuels that honesty. Sit." The Veil of Detachment's dinner proceeded with an unsettling rhythm. He asked about her journalistic background, her connection to Councilmember Green, and her goals for her time at City Hall. His questions were sharp, penetrating, and intelligent, a test, but a genuine interrogation of her motivations. He seemed far more interested in her mind than her appearance, though his eyes lingered on her often enough to keep the tension taut. "You called me arrogant," Oren stated, swirling the wine in his glass. "And cold? You based that on a 30-second encounter where I corrected your negligent handling of confidential documents." "Correct?" "It was the manner of the correction, Chief. It lacked basic human empathy, Eliza countered, finding her footing. It suggested that your priority is protocol, not people. Oren looked away for a moment, out at the shimmering city lights. When he turned back, the granite in his eyes seemed harder. Empathy is a luxury, Eliza. Especially in this chair. The Silver Creek Police Department has been bleeding credibility for 3 years. Officers were taking bribes. Evidence was disappearing. Good people were losing their jobs. I was brought in to stop the rot, which means I had to draw a line in the sand, a very cold, very clear line. He set his glass down sharply. If I offer warmth, they look for weakness. If I apologize for a reasonable correction, they assume I can be manipulated. I don't have the political capital to be liked right now. I have the professional requirement to be effective, and if that effectiveness requires a public veneer of detachment of arrogance, as you call it, then that's the price I pay. Eliza studied him. The explanation was logical, brutal, and profoundly lonely. She saw the deep grooves of fatigue around his eyes, the subtle tautness in his jaw that spoke of relentless pressure. He wasn't just working a job. He was shouldering a massive weight. That sounds incredibly isolating, she murmured. It is the job, he simply stated. And I did hear your colleague call me unfairly hot. I suppose that provides some minor professional compensation. The hint of a genuine smile finally touched his lips a quick, disarming flash that instantly softened his severity, making him look less like a chief and more like a man exhausted by the burden. He carried the unspoken trusters. They finished the meal. The conversation shifted to a more guarded, yet intensely personal connection. Oren began to ask her specific, intricate questions about the Holland Street files, a long-standing cold case involving corporate embezzlement that the previous chief had inexplicably shelved. He clearly valued her perspective, the perspective of someone outside the department's internal politics. Councilmember Green is preparing to publicly challenge you on this case, Lisa noted. He thinks you're covering for the mayor's office, just like your predecessor. Oren leaned back, crossing his arms. And what do you think, Eliza? She hesitated. I think you wouldn't be going to this extreme of a private covert meeting just to cover a case. You'd simply order me to stay away from the files. I think you're using Councilmember Green's political noise as cover for your own investigation. A long moment of silence passed. Oren looked at her with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. You're a good journalist, Eliza Thorn. You see the pattern behind the pretext. I am looking at the systemic failure of the previous administration. And the only way to expose it without alerting the high-level players is to work outside the traditional leak-prone channels. That includes a private, mandatory dinner with the councilman's sharpest assistant. He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting, his professional distance firmly re-established. I now have your assessment of my professional methods, and you have mine. We both know this encounter was a deliberate move. The next time you discuss me, be aware that I may be closer than you think. Or, more accurately, assume I am always listening. He walked her to the door. Get home safely. And keep your observations to yourself. This dinner and the nature of the files we discussed remains strictly confidential. I expect professional discretion, even if your initial assessment of my character was less than discreet. Lisa found herself nodding. Not out of subservience, but out of a genuine recognition of the danger and the gravity of the work he was doing. As she drove away, she realized the dinner hadn't solved her confusion. It had magnified it. He was still arrogant, still commanding. But now she understood that his arrogance was a carefully constructed shield, a necessary tactical tool. The cold chief was a performance, and she had just been given a very brief, very privileged glimpse behind the curtain. The question was, why had he chosen her, the very person who had publicly denounced him, to share his secret intensity? The file she had delivered suddenly felt like a dangerous shared secret, and the tension between them, once purely adversarial, now felt overwhelmingly magnetic. The professional boundaries dinner had, predictably, obliterated any semblance of normal professional interaction between Eliza Thorn and Chief Oren Holmes. The following weeks became a blur of covert glances, coded communications, and tense late-night meetings. The relationship existed in a constant state of charged ambiguity, strictly professional. When they crossed paths in the brightly lit, public hallways of City Hall or the police department, but undeniably personal and often electric, when they found themselves alone, dissecting the intricacies of the Holland Street case, Oren didn't explicitly ask Eliza to help him, but his subtle mandates were clear. He would route difficult information through Councilmember Green's office, always ensuring the critical details landed on Eliza's desk. He needed her investigative skills, her outsider's perspective, and her access to City Hall records that his own department, now under heavy internal scrutiny, couldn't safely touch. One Thursday evening, Eliza was working late, cataloging decades of zoning variances that might connect to the Holland Street corruption, a painstaking task when the door to her outer office creaked open. Lieutenant Avery Nolan, the chief's pragmatic lieutenant, stood there, looking tired and guarded. "Miss Thorn, I need you to come with me," Avery said quietly. "The chief needs to see you now, and he specifically requested you use the service elevator, not the main lobby." Eliza immediately knew the situation was serious. The need for this level of secrecy meant the internal threat they suspected was active. She grabbed her coat and followed Avery, who led her down to the police basement garage. Waiting there was Chief Holmes's matte black SUV. Oren was already in the driver's seat. The sudden ambush get in the back. "Eliza," Oren ordered, his voice tight with controlled urgency. Avery slid into the passenger seat. "We're moving the Holland Street case evidence cache. The department's server was compromised an hour ago. Standard procedure dictates a physical transfer now before the data can be located and destroyed." Eliza climbed in, the air in the car thick with tension. She noticed Oren was no longer wearing his typical suit jacket. His white shirt was slightly crumpled, and his tie was loose. He looked less polished, more prepared for conflict. They drove in silence for 10 tense minutes, navigating the darkened industrial district. Eliza felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The corruption they were chasing went higher than anyone realized, possibly right to the mayor's office. Mayor Sterling, as they slowed to enter the perimeter of an old, decommissioned warehouse, their intended secure transfer, point-a-black sedan, swerved violently out of the shadows, slamming directly into the passenger side of Oren's SUV. The impact was bone-dash jarring. The world spun. Airbags deployed with a choking cloud of powder. Eliza heard Lieutenant Nolan grunt in pain. Oren reacted instantly, pushing the driver's side door open despite the jarring hit. "Avery, cover the evidence," he barked, his professionalism instantly replaced by the raw command of a field officer. "Eliza, stay down." Before Eliza could process the chaos, Oren was out of the car. Two figures emerged from the sedan that hit them, their faces obscured by shadows and heavy clothing. Eliza saw Oren move with a speed and practiced skill that belied his formal attire. He wasn't just a political chief. He was a highly trained operative. The ensuing conflict was quick and brutal, ending when Oren slammed one figure against the sedan's hood and used his shoulder radio to emit a high-pitched alarm, instantly signaling an emergency. The two assailants, recognizing the failure, scrambled back into their damaged car and sped away, a break in the armor, shaken but relatively unharmed. Eliza and Avery managed to stabilize the scene, confirming the physical evidence box was secure. Lieutenant Nolan's arm was likely sprained, but she insisted she was fine. Oren, meanwhile, was leaning against the damaged SUV, breathing hard, rubbing his temple where he'd knocked it against the steering wheel. "They were after the hard copies," Oren muttered, his voice hoarse. "They knew we were moving them. Internal leak. They are panicking." Eliza, adrenaline still pumping, looked at the exhausted chief. The cold, perfect facade was completely shattered. He looked vulnerable, strained, and intensely human. This wasn't just about protocol anymore. It was life and death, and he was risking his own safety to protect a case his predecessor wanted buried. "Chief, your head is bleeding," Eliza pointed out softly. Pulling a tissue from her pocket, he ignored her, his eyes fixed on the retreating headlights of the assailant's car. "I knew they were close. I didn't think they would escalate to this." Eliza stepped closer, ignoring his rank and his distance. Oren, look at me. She used his first name deliberately, forcing him to acknowledge her as an equal in this shared trauma. She gently pressed the tissue to a small cut near his hairline. You're not a machine, Oren. You just took a massive hit to the head. He flinched slightly at the contact but didn't pull away. The proximity was overwhelming. She could feel the heat radiating off him, the residual energy of the fight. I can't afford to be human, Eliza, he whispered, his gray eyes locked onto hers. No longer cold, but haunted. Humanity costs lives in this city. The cost of a shield kept the pressure on the cut, her gaze steady. Why, Oren? Why the detachment? Why the need for the perfect shield? He hesitated, looking away toward the desolate warehouse. The silence stretched, broken only by the gentle ticking of the cooling engine. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible, raw with pain that had nothing to do with the crash. 5 years ago, I was working in Capital City. I had a partner, Jonah. We were close. To close, maybe. He was warm, trusting everything you said I wasn't. He didn't believe in walls. He thought people deserved a second chance, even the ones we were investigating. Oren paused, taking a deep, ragged breath. We were investigating a major narcotics ring. Jonah got too friendly with a civilian informant, shared too much, showed empathy. That informant was compromised, and the information led them straight to Jonah's wife, Lydia. They took her as leverage. They thought I would back off the case if they had her. Lisa felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. What happened? I didn't back off. I played by the book. Protocol. I cornered them, but I was too late. Oren's voice cracked, and he swallowed hard, fighting for control. Lydia didn't make it. She was found 2 days later. Jonah blamed me, blamed the system, blamed protocol. He quit the force, ruined. I realized then that the moment you allow yourself to show weakness, to feel too deeply, to rely on hope or empathy, you give them the weapon they need to destroy you. He finally met her eyes, and they were swimming with unshed emotion, the grief he had meticulously buried beneath his professional shell. I am cold, Lisa, because being warm killed Lydia. I am arrogant, because if I look weak, they come for the people I care about. I came here to dismantle this corruption, and I will do it alone if necessary. But I won't allow myself to connect with anyone who could become another weakness. That's why I was so harsh on your first eye, was building my wall higher, not just for them, but for myself. He finally stepped away from the SUV, the admission hanging heavy in the cool night air. The truth was devastating. His arrogance wasn't a personality flaw. It was a scar, a carefully maintained fortress against repeating a devastating tragedy. Eliza, seeing the absolute gut-wrenching pain in his eyes, understood everything. She hadn't called the police chief arrogant. She had called a traumatized man a name. And now she was standing outside the fortress, and he had given her the key. You're not alone in this, Oren. Eliza said firmly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. I saw what happened tonight. They're trying to silence you. I'm still the councilman's assistant. I'm still the journalist. I have access, and I can ask questions they won't suspect. We can use my arrogance assessment as our cover. Let them think you're so high and mighty, you can't be touched. Let them think I'm just a civilian employee you're briefly harassing. I can help you. Oren stared at her, the exhaustion and relief battling across his severe features. He extended a hand, not for comfort, but to steady himself against the car, the gesture betraying his fatigue. If you do this, Eliza, you're in the line of fire. You saw what they did tonight. I know, she said, her voice completely calm. And I'd rather be in the line of fire fighting this with you than standing on the sidelines watching them win. Now, let's get Avery to the emergency room. And then, we need to talk about where we can hide this evidence box until we're ready to expose the mayor. The Iceman's granite eyes softened, just a fraction. He didn't thank her, didn't apologize. Instead, he gave her a sharp, resolute, nada, silent acknowledgement that they're fragile. Professional tension had just fractured, revealing a shared purpose, a dangerous commitment, and a deep, unexpected bond forged in the chaos of a midnight ambush.